I feel weird writing a piece about a film I haven't seen, but though I don't have a Netflix subscription, I would like to respond to the responses I have seen, hopefully from a Christian perspective, and provide a way to view the film if you're considering watching it. For those who don't know, To the Bone is a film on Netflix about Ellen, played by Lily Collins, who struggles with anorexia. If you haven't seen it yet, you should probably know that a lot of people are disappointed by the ending. So be prepared. The critics have a lot of issues with it, but 3 I've seen are firstly the possibility of triggering people, secondly the glamorization of this illness, and thirdly stereotypical representation. All of this can be seen in the responses to one element of the film, the graphic depiction of what anorexics go through each day. 3 of my sources each said 3 different things about them. Beginning broadly, BuzzFeed's collection of tweets responding to the trailer of the film reveal everyone's concerns about triggering people with ED. Furthermore, they think images like this will encourage copycats. The Herald Sun said that these graphic images are what redeems the film from glorifying the illness. Ellen is pretty, but her disease is not. But people with ED have brains that don't perceive these actions as ugly. The Guardian referred to the graphic depiction of what anorexics go through as outdated stereotypes and points out the film never asks why so many women feel unhappy. The thing is, it does answer why, but only for Ellen's character. To the Bone does not provide a detailed investigation into a representative sample of people struggling with various eating disorders. It does provide the emotionally moving entertainment of a story about a white middle-class girl with anorexia and what leads her to decide to recover. We should respond with compassion towards this character. This can be difficult if you've struggled with ED yourself. In that case, I'd recommend watching it with friends and or family and discuss your own experience afterwards. That's if you want to watch it at all. When it comes to triggering people, I hold a philosophy of responsibility both on the viewer to know themselves and the source to provide ample trigger warning. We have to express these issues for awareness' sake, but when we inevitably do so in a way that could trigger a sufferer, we have the responsibility not to remove the discussion, but warn the participants. If you are triggered by images of anorexia, then don't even watch the trailer. If you don't get triggered easily and have overcome the illness, then watch the trailer. Many people found the trailer triggering, so if you don't find it so, then you can watch the movie. But if the trailer only makes you a little queasy and you still want to watch the movie, watch it with a friend, your family, or a group of folk that support you. When it comes to glamorizing the issue, critics think Ellen is too sexy or at least too beautiful in this film. Indeed, one of the comments on a review I've seen is about how hot she is. This is bad, and we should be careful not to ignore it. Yes, it's entertainment, but the purpose of entertainment is not to satisfy our desire to look at pretty people. Christians can go on and on about this, but it's particularly relevant when the subject is not meant to be pretty. As audience members, we must be vigilant that we aren't voyeuristic. If there's any media that portrays a person going through anorexia as attractive, don't ignore it, talk about it. Being healthy is attractive. Anorexics as beautiful is a terrible stereotype. When it comes to stereotypical representation, I have a lot to say. This is the first time I've noticed representation being talked about by those with eating disorders, but it's not the first time we've encountered this conundrum. Stereotypical representation has had backlash from different genders, races, cultures, orientations, and probably more. And we've progressed a little each time. When it comes to representation, it's not about encouraging behavior, it's about representing the truth, whether that truth about humanity is sinful or not. Telling a variety of stories about a group of people is the solution to generalizing and propagating an untrue stereotype about that group of people. More movies, more stories are being made about people in these circumstances, and because of a director's pride, we'll never see the same story twice when it comes to discussing these issues. Film is a surprisingly slow medium to catch up with the times. I hope this film won't be the last about ED, so hopefully next time they'll look back at this backlash and back up a sec to tell a story less often told. The reason resorting to stereotypes is unhealthy is because it makes people who watch it believe only those stereotypes are the thing itself.
The problem with stereotypes is not that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. They make one story become the only story.
If all media represented women as weak, then you'd believe even the strong women in your life were weak, and be blind to their strength. Likewise, if all media represented anorexics as beautiful, then you'd start to think anorexia itself is beautiful. When skinny white girls are the only examples of anorexics, you can start to think that all skinny white girls are anorexic. We need to stop calling skinny supermodels and movie stars anorexic for one, because unless they actually are, they aren't. Calling a skinny model anorexic is the equivalent of calling a homeless person a junkie. It's unhelpful to the solution, it's judgmental, and it's lazy generalizing instead of trying to understand and thereby love the individual. So what are the overused tropes found in To the Bone? An article in the spin-off points to how Ellen is the type of person you'd expect to get anorexia, a white middle-class straight CIS young woman, how her mental illness is blamed on bad parenting instead of representing the supportive parents of those with ED, and how, since it's unclear what motivates her to recover, it points to a weird therapist, romance, and good vibes and poetry to make you well. What's interesting about anorexia is that the stereotypes are sometimes true, but not always and not even often. Firstly, working to upper middle class women under 30 are the most at risk, but not the only ones. This story is about a particular character, not about all people with ED. Secondly, body dysmorphia can be the result of family issues. This story uses familial drama and comedy because it's more dramatic and more comedic to have conflict with your family than not. Lastly, the motivation to recover is to realize that you need help. This story is the journey to the realization, not the turnaround after. Clearly, every person's story is different. Now, a video by the A to Z show said that this particular story is one person's story. The writer was a white middle-class girl when she struggled with anorexia. The point of a film is not to tell everyone's story, but one individual's. I agree. I feel it would be disingenuous and disrespectful to try to tell everyone's story in one film. In an interview with Cosmopolitan, Noxon discussed having representation of people other than white middle-class young women in the film. So she tried, but this ended up being token representation instead of delving deeply into their issues. Whereas in Spider-Man Homecoming of all movies, each individual character was so fleshed out, except maybe Liz. But anyway, To the Bone is less like Crash and Love Actually, exploring the ideas of racism and love, and more like Man Down, which explores one character's experience of PTSD. However, I then read an article in The Guardian that countered that by saying everything is an individual experience. But if your retelling of it strikes no general chord, the fault is in your telling. Unpacking that, if the majority of people feel it's a betrayal of their experience of the same thing, then it can't be true, therefore it lies to everyone watching. As an audience, we have the responsibility not to get our facts from fiction. Film is a conversation starter, not a conversation ender. But art does have a responsibility to represent an issue realistically. Though it's probable To the Bone will represent this singular story realistically, this story was not about the issue, but about a person who happened to have the issue. That's what Alex Myers said in a video essay in which he explained how, in To the Bone, we only see anorexia from this one character's point of view. He pointed out this film is marketed as a realistic insight into what body dysmorphia is like. It isn't. It's about a person with a lot of issues. Another thing Alex Myers pointed out was the reason for Ellen's illness that evaded the Guardian journalist. Reasons differ between people with ED. In Ellen's case, it was about control. This links to the director's own life.
I think a lot of addiction is about trying to control our feelings, and I had an addiction to starving. And I think a lot of my recovery came when I embraced the idea that you can't control stuff. You just have to live and enjoy and be helpful, and that stuff sorts itself out. I'm still here and I'm super happy, so I think you just have to have faith and leap. That's my advice.
So that's Ellen's side, and we never see any other side. People say that since it tells a story we already know, it doesn't add anything to the conversation about anorexia. I would argue that's not the point. It's trying to start a conversation, or boost it with a little attention in the media form that's most glorified by the modern West. We put a lot of pressure on something that is first and foremost entertainment, as if it's not the news's responsibility to represent these issues, or a documentary. If we took an average case of anorexia and literally just put it on the screen, it wouldn't work without a little drama. That's one of the reasons why To the Bone works as a story. I admit I haven't seen it, but the psychological and family issues that Ellen deals with on top of the mental illness itself make for some interesting conflict. As someone who's read a bit about story structure, you need conflict and you need interesting plot twists throughout. However, I think it's possible to write a character with an eating disorder, find the plot reversals in their story, and tell it through interesting conflict without resorting to stereotypes. To anyone who thinks it would be less interesting to write about a more average case, I say this is a result of our current media climate. Our art has responded to our sensationalism, short attention spans, and desire for instant gratification. This makes movies that are afraid to take their time and tell a story about a normal person, albeit a normal anorexic person. And the more we watch like this, the more we want to watch like this. Last century, the films were a lot slower paced. Even 80s movies like the original Blade Runner are pretty boring compared to even something like Interstellar. But slow-burning films are being made today. Sicario by Denis Villeneuve and Hunger by Steve McQueen jump to mind. Point being, we need to cultivate a patient mind when viewing films by being empathetic to the characters on screen. I mean, I'm one to talk, I love a fast-paced story, but because it's slow, it doesn't mean it's boring. A film should not be so true to life that it becomes more of a documentary than a narrative.
Because in my opinion, movies that are like, oh, my life, not good.
You take the sad stuff and you put a lot of funny moments in it. Because real life is boring. Now,
otherwise you may as well make it a documentary, which is really important, and people should. But in a present tense narrative, even based on a true story, to neglect the film technique required to make people care for the character and about the events is a crime level to only the worst Christian movies. It gets too meta and preachy and tells the audience the experience instead of showing us through the character's decisions.
Do you truly believe all this?
I believe.
It's the responsibility of filmmakers to not be lazy and write with a deep understanding of what they're portraying, as well as a rich knowledge of film technique in order to portray the unimaginable realistically. Stereotypes are usually lazy writing. Hopefully To the Bone tries to tell the story, although it's a stereotypical one, in a way that makes us care, not only about anorexia, but also about the character and the outcome. The outcome is a positive one, portraying that the people in this dire situation can find a way out. But the way out is hard to portray. Like faith, a mental illness is unseen by anything but its results. What makes Ellen decide to change her life? Noxon said in that interview with Cosmopolitan that turning point was that moment of awareness, of epiphany, like, oh, this is an unhealthy body that needs help. Accepting you've got a problem is the first step. As an audience, we should know there's a lot more to it after that. If you still get the impression that To the Bone points to a particular type of therapy, romance, or an easy fix to solve your problems, you should know that the Bible has a term for this. Idols. Things or people we turn to and seek strength from apart from God that ultimately fail us. In my experience of knowing someone with an eating disorder, there was no thing that happened that changed the way she felt or thought. The negative thoughts that had been keeping hold of her started slowly breaking down. Often we call this finding strength within ourselves, and harsh Christians would refute that and say God alone gives you strength, when in reality it's both. God gives us the strength that we find in ourselves. Obviously, if you've had an eating disorder, it's difficult to refrain from comparing your life to the movie. I don't expect you to refrain, but seeing the genuine intention of the filmmakers, Lily Collins herself having recovered from anorexia, you and everybody can allow yourselves to care about this one person's story. Not yours, not everyone's, but one valuable person's story. Showing compassion towards what reviles us as one of God's greatest gifts. Indeed, we revile him, yet he still loved us enough to put the shame on Jesus instead of us. film can be an excellent exercise in this empathy, walking in someone else's shoes. Every human is valuable to God because He made us, not because of what we do. So when seeing a film, we have the chance to know and feel the value of others simply by knowing their story. It's a story that uses bad representation, so be aware of that, and it's a story that entertains with familial drama, so be aware that parents are often way more helpful. And it's a story about a girl who, at the end, realizes she's unwell for the first time. That is the message for everybody in the grips of body dysmorphia. What you're doing is unhealthy. But if you'd use this film as inspiration, don't watch it. A character at the start of a movie is never a good role model. That's the nature of a story. The character needs to change to succeed. Other triggering images are present, so you may decide to stay away and keep good conscience. It's not like we shouldn't watch To the Bone simply because of its flaws. One thing I've appreciated is the conversation about eating disorders this film has started. That's the way we should watch this film, as entertainment that starts a discussion. And whether you watch it or not, you can participate by telling your own story. We must all talk about mental health because we all need to be aware of what some people are going through and have gone through. Always remember, every individual person is different and valuable to God. If you want to watch this movie and you're going through or have gone through ED, watch it with a friend, or a family, or a group, and talk about Ellen's experience, your experience, and God's love for you.